opening the door to the building of the third Jewish temple. Some called it a kiss from heaven.
The most significant news yet is the long-awaited construction of the third temple. Just when the world thought the path was clear for this historical taking on, an unforeseen twist has emerged. The latest revelation has sparked a stir and raised concerns that might shake up the plan's basic foundations. So don't miss out on this update, which will leave everyone wondering what the future holds for the third temple. Tune in now to find out what's been discovered and ready to be blown away. The time is coming when it will no longer matter whether you worship the Father on this mountain or in Jerusalem. The Father is looking for true worshipers, those that worship Him in spirit truth. Jesus in John chapter 4, verses 21 through 24. The temple in which Jesus preached was destroyed in 70 AD and never rebuilt. The temple in Jerusalem is fundamental to Orthodox and Orthodox Jews' religions, and it corresponds with their faith in the Messiah. The third temple is the one that is yet to be completed, and many modern Jews yearn for it, especially after the return to the Promised Land after World War II. However, Muslims currently govern that area of the city, and most of the Jewish homeland is contested between Jews and Muslims. The third temple is a hotly contested topic. What about Christians, though? What is the New Testament's take on the third temple? Solomon's temple was erected around 1000 BC and destroyed in 586 BC by Babylon. The Ark of the Covenant had already been destroyed as part of Israel and Judah's demise. The Old Testament does not specify when or who stole the Ark, but it could have been taken by the Egyptians or even Babylon. Following the fall of Babylon and the rise of the Persian Empire, the king of Persia permitted Jews to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the wall and the temple. The book of Nehemiah tells the tale of the wall's reconstruction, while Ezra tells the story of the Second Temple's construction, which lasted from 538 to 515 BC. While there was much sadness and joy at the temple's reconstruction, there was no miraculous manifestation by God to leave His imprint on the Second Temple. The Ark was either never discovered or discovered but not repaired. In 37 BC, King Herod, a Roman political puppet, expanded the Second Temple. There was no Ark of the Covenant and thus no evident presence of God in the Second Temple when Jesus was born. During the Roman Empire, the Second Temple was demolished in 70 AD. It was never reconstructed. Because of the loss and grief over the destruction of the temple and the lack of a central place to worship God for the Jews, a single section of the wall survives today, and it is known as the Wailing Wall. When Judah and Jerusalem were conquered by Babylon and Solomon's temple was destroyed, Ezekiel's book contains a vision of the temple being rebuilt. He discusses the grandeur and layout of the new temple as well as how God's splendor enters it. In his work, Ezra constructs the Second Temple and restores Jerusalem's religion. The Second Temple, however, is not the one seen by Ezekiel in his vision. The two are drastically different. The visual power was again missing at the dedication of the Second Temple. Several events occur at the Second Temple in the Gospels. Jesus referred to his own body as the temple of God, telling the Jews that if they destroyed it, he would rebuild it in 3 days, which seemed insane to them, but Jesus was referring to his own death and resurrection. In probably 2 separate episodes, Jesus cleanses the temple, particularly the outer court. Jesus also lectured on a regular basis in the temple's outer court where everyone might gather. The only other actual physical temple mentioned in the New Testament is in Revelation 21 as part of the vision of the new heaven and new earth, which is both a temple and the city of God. The short answer is that no physical third temple is being built on this earth, unless we're discussing something else, something more lofty and wonderful. That is mentioned in the New Testament. It is neither one nor the other. The Old Testament spoke of a king-to-be Messiah. Was that literal or figurative? As described in Hebrews, Jesus did not bear the worldly titles of king or high priest. Is this to say that he did not fulfill the Davidic messianic prophecies? Or is it that he isn't a great high priest? Obviously not. On the contrary, Christ fulfilled those prophecies in the kingdom of heaven sense, expanding the fulfillment by making it larger and more complete, eternal. The messianic prophecies were based on the physical dynasty of Judah, but Jesus became king for all time in God's eternal kingdom. The profound confession that Jesus made before Pilate was that his kingdom was not of this world. So why would we insist on a tangible third temple? There is plenty in the New Testament to demonstrate that the temple Christ created is an eternal one in the people of God. In 3 days, Jesus died and was resurrected. His resurrected body was shown to others. The church is referred to be his body, with Jesus as its source and head. In the Gospels, Jesus also taught that if someone declares that God is in a specific location, people should not travel there. God's kingdom is within people who follow Jesus. The woman at the well attempted to start a religious debate with Jesus over whether the mountain was the proper place to worship, which were two separate religious viewpoints in temples. What was Jesus' response? God is not worshipped in a specific location. He is spirit, and he seeks people who would worship in spirit truth. When Jesus died, the veil that separated the people from the Holy of Holies was torn in two from top to bottom, symbolizing the end of the old system's separation and division. Also, the Apostle Paul states that on the cross, Jesus put to death the law, the old covenant. That covenant included the temple system. We belong to the new covenant. House is another word for temple, and God's reborn people are called his home, constructed together as living stones, where Jesus is also portrayed as the living stone, the cornerstone of a house that humanity rejected, but God used to create his house. We are stones, not bricks, each with a unique shape but fashioned of the same substance and joined by God. It is customary in the Bible to refer to people as different types of stones. The diamonds on the high priest's breastplate represent each tribe of Israel. Jesus is now the high priest. Ephesians chapter 2 verse 20 describes the apostles and prophets as stones in the foundation of the city of God. Malachi chapter 3 verse 17 refers to God's righteous people as diamonds. If the church is his house, how did he designate it with the same purpose as the temple? He marked the people of God with fire on the day of Pentecost. In Acts chapter 2 verse 3, similar to the tabernacle, Solomon's temple, and Mount Sinai in Exodus chapter 19 verse 18. Christians, like the Holy of Holies, house the presence of God within them. The presence of God occurs when two or more are gathered in his name, demonstrating that there is no need for a physical structure. While John is shown the New Jerusalem on the new heaven and earth, which is a city, garden, and temple, a booming voice from God's throne declares, "Look, God's home is now among his people. He will dwell with them and consider them his people. God himself will be present. He will wipe away their tears, and there will be no more death, sorrow, crying, or agony. All of these things are gone for good." The declaration comes from Scripture and prophecy directly from God's throne. God's home, house, city, and temple are now with his people. He is there with them even now through the indwelling Holy Spirit. What is the temple's purpose? To begin, we must return to Moses' original tabernacle in the wilderness. Because they were nomadic tribes, God instructed them to construct a tent for a house of worship where people could meet with God, priests could execute the rituals God asked of them, and the Israelites could gather as people. The tabernacle was supernaturally marked as God's assigned place from the beginning. The Holy of Holies was the centerpiece of the tabernacle where they deposited the Ark of the Covenant, which kept the manifest presence of God behind a thick veil. After the judges came the kings, beginning with Saul and ending with David. David had relocated the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, Israel's new capital, and desired to provide a permanent home for it. God stated unequivocally that he did not require one, but the duty of constructing the temple was given to David's son Solomon. David handed the instructions to Solomon, and Solomon built the temple, which had a split construction similar to the tabernacle and housed the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies. The temple fulfilled the same aim of containing God's presence and serving as a location for Israel to fellowship with and worship God. God expressed his satisfaction with the temple once more by a supernatural manifestation. The second temple served the same function as the first, as a place to meet with God, commune with him, and worship him. To be consistent with God's law, referred to as the Mosaic or Old Covenant, several Old Covenant rites necessitate the use of a tabernacle or temple. The third temple would provide the Jews with a central site to worship and fully fulfill God's promise to them. For Jews who believed that the temple's collapse was a punishment for their sin and rebellion, the third temple would be a sign of salvation alongside the coming Messiah. Will the third temple survive? Only this time there is no Assyria to wipe out the old Israelites, no Babylon to send the Judeans away, and no Rome to end Jewish rule for 2,000 years. Iran would have liked to be their conqueror today, but the Jewish state is destroying itself from the inside. Menachem Begin may have started the buildup when he won by a landslide in 1977 by playing on the animosity between the mostly Mizrahi Second Israel and the mostly Ashkenazi First Israel. During the next 4 decades, Israel's fragile web of coexistence was turned into a political issue and was treated in a rough way. Since the late 2000s, with the rise of commercial news channels and social media, Likud's public voice has become aggressively sectarian, anti-secular, anti-liberal, and anti-Ashkenazi. 3 millennia of Jewish history became pawns in Israel's political game, with nationalists claiming biblical bounds mysteriously emptied of Arabs and ultra-Orthodox leaders despising non-believers. Jews who are secular and liberal joined the fight to claim their right as rightful heirs to Jewish history and culture. They did this by taking a modern selective look at Jewish treasures like the Bible and the Talmud. Years passed. Netanyahu was put on trial, and as a result, he turned against the court system. His friends, who are now a well-organized network of fake journalists and shofars, put together a case against the Israeli Supreme Court, charging it with Ashkenazi elitism and left-wing leanings. Still, they didn't know what was going to happen. They were for democracy and the free exchange of ideas. When Netanyahu put together his full-right government in December 2022, which was made up of extreme nationalists and ultra-Orthodox people, it seemed like they were still living in an old Jewish world, where different groups of Jews were angry and even hated each other, but still managed to work together and share history, language, and fate. Or in the case of Israel, a delicate social contract that allowed the ultra-Orthodox not to serve in the army, the alt-nationalists to settle in the West Bank, and the liberal seculars to enjoy Tel Aviv, the economy they helped grow, and the beauty of their imperfect but livable state. Then everything fell apart. When the alt-right Netanyahu government was elected, it pushed an extreme nationalist, ultra-Orthodox, and racist set of policies, but it didn't make it clear to its voters and opponents that it wanted to end court independence. It didn't say that it wanted to turn Israel into a country like Poland or Hungary, where there's no split of powers or free press and there's no Bill of Rights. Israel is not a new country. It has been around for 75 years. It has been a democracy since 1897, when the first Zionist Congress took place in Basel. It was a democratic Congress, and it became even more democratic amazingly early the next year when women became full members. But Israeli society didn't find out about its hidden power until 2023. They are now bigger and more diverse than the so-called First Israel, which was mostly secular, liberal, and sometimes rich. And that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update on this, and we'll see you in the next video.